Guys, welcome to the podcast. Today I have got John from Zaprite with me. John, you're very welcome, man.
Thanks for having me, Dinny. Appreciate it. Looking forward to the chat.
So I'm wondering, you've been in Bitcoin for over a decade. How are you so smart to make that decision? What was your journey in?
I wouldn't say it was smart. It was more luck, I'd say. Even at that, it took me a long time to actually get into it. But I first started looking into it and first started buying Bitcoin in 2013. I think I just read an article somewhere. In fact, I know that's what it was, but I can't remember what the article was. I'm guessing it was like Silk Road or Mount Gox or something like that just kind of piqued my interest. Like, what is this thing? And tried it out, downloaded a wallet. At that point, the chain size was still pretty small, so you downloaded like every wallet just downloaded a full copy of it. As a lot do now, but you basically had no like BIP39 seed phrases or anything, so you're pretty much just writing out your private key like on a piece of paper. Um, and Yeah, tried it out. Just started buying a bit of Bitcoin, testing it out, seeing what it was, and kind of just lost interest in it like after a couple of weeks, couple of months, and came back to it again in 2015, 16, and then got sucked up into the whole altcoin ICO 2017, like massive year of like just nuts. And um and then obviously like just got wrecked, lost everything, and then really kind of like studied after that, and came out in 2018 as a kind of hardened Bitcoin maxi. After really going through like a couple of cycles of seeing what altcoins do to you. So it's been a kind of an up and down whirlwind journey. Over the last 10 years, I wouldn't say I've been like, I'm not some kind of like OG who's been there like right in the thick of it for 10 years, but it's been a long journey. So I'm definitely kind of hardened on the Bitcoin side of it now.
That's pretty awesome. It's I find a lot of us have a similar journey. I have one of my questions here is, are you into altcoins? So I'll just scratch that out now. You've got the scars.
Yeah.
You've got the altcoin scars, and
I've got the altcoin scars. But I mean, if you want to go deeper into that conversation, we can a little bit, or we can save it to later, like your call. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's understandable. It's the first kind of point of entry for a lot of people. You see the hype, you see the marketing, you see all the friends talking about it. They're making like mad gains and they want to get in on this token and that token and the next thing. And it's all about like trying to make more euros, right? Put euros in, get more back out. Like that's what it is. Um, but once you actually like really see Bitcoin for what it is, which is, among many other things, it's just a way to kind of have hope that you can fix a lot of the wrongs in the world. And it starts with fixing the money. And once you see that, you have a more altruistic view of Bitcoin, and you start to see it as really a necessity, like a survival tool for humanity to kind of just get out of this clown world that we're in right now. And so, you know, even though right now I have a kind of severe hatred for anybody that kind of knows about Bitcoin and understands Bitcoin, but like pushes it aside to just go do the scammy marketing stuff on altcoins. Um, I've no time for that whatsoever. I'll call that out all day long, but I do understand that people get like sucked into it, newbies and normies, because I did it myself. It's just hard to avoid it. But yeah, right now it's just really an altruistic thing. Like if you're an altcoin developer, if you know Bitcoin and you know what it can do, but you decide to do other things, then as far as I'm concerned, you're just running interference on humanity's progress, and you got to be called out for that. That's really as simple as it is. It's just recognizing Bitcoin for the powerful tool that it is, and trying to put aside everything else that's just really a distraction.
sure, it's pretty heavy stuff. And I suppose with
Yeah.
altcoins, I find it's like there's the incentive there. Let's even just say for me as a podcast, for the last 3 years, I've refused sponsorship from, I don't know, 20 tokens, 30 tokens, just because it didn't align with me. I'm like, I can make a few quid off this, but I'm possibly going to wreck all my audience. Do I want
Mm.
to go here? Because one, I don't know if this thing is a scam or not a scam or even a legitimate program. Like I don't have the sophistication or the time or the want to try and do all the due diligence on it. But there's a definite incentive there for me if I was in a less financially secure position and needed the money more so to be like, oh, you're offering me, it's very hard to say I don't want
Yeah.
money. Let's just put it like that.
Absolutely, yeah, 100%. Like you hit the nail on the head, and fair play to you for doing that because like there's a lot of people who wouldn't do that. You know, they would just take the easy option, take the money, and you know, you do kind of ask those questions at the start. You're kind of like, you know, is this a scam? Is it not a scam? Is there any merit in this altcoin or that blockchain or this or that and the other? As far as I'm concerned, they all are. There's not a single use case out there for any altcoin or blockchain other than Bitcoin. Like blockchain isn't even like the fascinating technology. It's just one small ingredient in the cake. Like it's just, you know, when people say, "Oh, it's blockchain, not Bitcoin," like that's the technology. Like that's just utter nonsense. Um, but to me, it's more, you know, if you're trying to ask the question of is this particular altcoin good or does it serve a use case or what it will do, to me, you're just missing the bigger picture. The bigger picture is we already have a solution to everything that we need in Bitcoin. So if you're wasting your time trying to answer those other questions, then that's all you're doing. You're wasting your time because there is a solution there, and you're just trying to avoid it by like thinking, you know, thinking you're smarter or thinking Bitcoin is like boomer tech and you're the young kid in the block and you can basically like figure out the new stuff and you know what's better. Um, it's really, you know, you need a true understanding of Bitcoin to actually understand that everything else is nonsense. Until you get to that understanding, you will get sucked up into various different aspects of crypto and NFT and all that other like BS.
Yeah. Um, One of the things I notice is you know in the crypto world, and I know as a Bitcoin maximalist, we can be hard on everything's a scam. But I meet these people, and you know I personally know a lot of people who are, you know, devoting their life to building on crypto. It's
Mm,
not for nefarious reasons. It's not that they're an outright scammer. They genuinely think that they're doing humanity a service, or to the opposite. So I suppose that's like a polar opposite to your view.
mm.
What would you say to that?
Yeah, you know, there are definitely people who are doing it for good reasons, for what they think are good reasons. I'm not saying they're all scammers. There are some of them who actually genuinely believe that, like, you know, there could be some good to come out of it. They just haven't thought it through enough. That's all it is. Like it's as simple as that. Like they just haven't spent the time to study through what it is they're actually doing. They haven't thought out the incentives, the game theory. They haven't looked deep into Bitcoin. Um, most people who most people who are working on other blockchains and other coins, I would imagine they're doing it because they're looking at the tech aspect of it, purely the tech. And they're looking at Bitcoin and saying, oh, well, this is slow, or it doesn't do these transactions per second, or it can't do smart contracts. So, like, there's this other better tech. So, like, it must be better. So, I'm going to work on this. They don't understand that, like, Bitcoin is just money. It's just a messaging protocol, like, to send money and value around. And that's what the world desperately needs. So forget blockchain, forget all this like garbage. Like we actually need to figure out what's good for humanity, not what's good for you to make a few bucks on another blockchain, right? It's like it's just two completely separate things. And until you actually come to that like realization, you will be stuck in this kind of like quasi mode of like, well, this is better tech and this altcoin and blockchain is promising and I might work on this. And but really like there's no legitimate use case for any of it, to be honest, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, sometimes I sort of think that, you know, if we're going to hate on altcoiners, then we have to hate on literally everything that's not Bitcoin. So if you work for a bank, you're also the enemy. If you work for a food company that makes a food that comes in a box, well, you are the enemy. You're doing a disservice to humanity, you know. And it can get pretty crazy then, where you make an enemy out of everyone. For me, I think it's you know I
Yeah.
sort of I know I see I try and sort of stay neutral, and I see both, I try and see both sides and always keep going back and forward and back and forward and looking back, and it always comes back to if I'm trying to sell something, and I've sold a lot of things in my lifetime as an entrepreneur. I try and get on the right side of someone rather than the wrong side of someone. If I want them to come to what I'm trying to sell or my conclusion or my belief or push my product on them, I try and win them over. I don't attack them, because if I attack them, I'm
Mm.
not going to sell them. And I think if we're trying to sell Bitcoin, for me anyway, how I try and do it is I don't go on the attack mode, but I see why people go on the attack mode, and I understand that. And I'm not saying
Yeah.
it's wrong and mine is right or anything. It's just how I sort of seem to try and get my head around this. and I know I'm not the smartest guy in the room by far. I'd be the other end of the scale. So, you know, I try and just be a little bit neutral and sort of try and absorb rather than making a decision,
Yeah.
and sort of just going, because sometimes I see that in Bitcoin, people just get blindsided by that, and they jump on the fence and they just follow along and they regurgitate other people's words, but they've never actually thought about it for themselves. They've never thought about the fact that, you know, it's a stupid example, but like they work for a bank. Like if you're so toxic, quit the job. You're feeding the machine, like, you know. But it's just stupid,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
because it's
yeah,
you know, it's not practical. We have to try and live in the system as well.
yeah.
And
Absolutely.
we're all human, so, you know, that means sinning or perfection isn't available to us. We're all going to be imperfect.
Absolutely. That's a great point, actually. Yeah. I mean, it's, I struggle with that as well. Sometimes it's like, as Bitcoin maxis, I mean, I even hate that term, but if we want to use it, it's like, okay, so we can be a bit like hard sometimes. And a lot of Bitcoiners do struggle with the reality that, like, you just can't attack everybody. They're confused. They don't know, like, they don't, like, if they haven't studied enough, they haven't learned enough. So, like, that's where you kind of need to just like be more persuasive and start teaching them about Bitcoin and the benefits and things like that. Um, in terms of, yeah, like, I mean, in terms of nobody's perfect. We're all kind of like a little bit impure. Yeah, I mean, to answer that, we've all got jobs where we have to mine fiat, and we don't really, we're not 100% Bitcoin standard as much as we want to be. But the answer I'd say to that is, like, that's fine, that's okay. Like, we're coming from the old world where, like, everybody did mine fiat and get paid in fiat and work for the man, for the, like, paying their taxes, doing all the kind of normal stuff. Um, and we have to slowly, like, graduate into this, like, Bitcoin world. But I think where the problem is people that, like, try and leave that fiat world and move into the crypto world. Like, that's where, like, we've got this new world, this Bitcoin, this thing that, like, it's so brand new. None of us really know, like, the full consequences of what it's going to do, but we're just hopeful because we know it has, like, amazing potential for humanity. And so we're trying to, like, pull people out of that fiat world into it. And then you get some people who just, like, move out of the fiat world and just, like, completely go the opposite direction into crypto. And that's where the problem lies. There's not a problem with people still working in fiat jobs. Um, we all have to do it. We all have to do it at some time in the past. The problem is when you just bypass Bitcoin and you just go, like, sideways to crypto. Like, that's just, it's a bad path, and we should call people out on it. Now, whether you be toxic about that or try and be gentle and persuasive about it, it depends on the person and their intentions, and how open they are to conversation. Um, but yeah, it's really just about, education, I think, more than anything else.
Awesome. Um, I'd love to hear you explain Bitcoin to me in your terms. I sort of like asking that to different people because everyone explains it or sees it, understands it slightly different. And obviously, you know, if we're having beers, we could talk about that for hours. But, you know, a sort of
Yeah,
condensed version of what is Bitcoin.
yeah, for sure. I mean, like, technically speaking, at a simple level, it's just a messaging protocol. Um, but the way I see it personally, and some people, you could have arguments with them about, like, some people say it's not a store of energy, it's not a store of time, it's not a store of this or that or the other, like, and they always try and, like, brush off different labels. But to me, it basically is just like, it's a store of, like, time and energy and work that you've put into doing things, and you just want to store it in something that you can actually use in the future, which is what we all do when we're working. We do it, but we do it for, fiat money, which devalues over time. And obviously with Bitcoin, with the capped supply, it should, like, raise value over time. So really, you're just, when you're spending your time and effort, um, on doing things, you just want to be rewarded in something that you can actually, like, hold into the future. Um, and Bitcoin is just far superior at that. Where fiat, obviously, like, with inflation and everything else, like, that comes along with it, it's not. So in a very, very basic terms, it is just a way to store your time and energy that you put into work, into something that you can use again in the future.
Awesome, really good. I heard, can't remember the second name of this lad now, Luke something, Rowan or something maybe, and he done a great tweet thread, but one of the analogies he used is like, how much better is a boat without a hull than a boat with a hull? It's not just a little bit better. It's
Yeah,
like it's infinitely better. A boat that isn't
yeah,
sinking, and that's sort of what
yeah,
Bitcoin is. It's a closed system. It's a boat that floats and isn't sinking.
yeah,
Whereas everything else that we're storing our value, like everything else that we're storing our value in, has
yeah.
holes, is sinking. And that's
Absolutely, yeah.
that's the big picture that we're not getting. That it's not just a little bit better. It's infinitely better.
Absolutely, yeah. It's like Michael Saylor's melting ice cube analogy. Like it's just literally that. It is infinitely better. Again, if you're going to work and you're going to get paid, and you want to use that, like, quote unquote money in the future to save you time of having to work and expend your resources again. You want something that at least hold its value, and like fiat just simply doesn't. So like it just wins like straight off the bat, and of course like it has all these other amazing properties that make it perfectly useful for the digital age that we're in and entering into. So you know it really, like you said, it is a boat without a hull.
It takes a good bit to understand it. And I was just literally listening to last week's podcast with Greg Foss, and he said he'd studied Bitcoin for thousands of hours and he's still learning. And I've also probably, I'd say, into the thousands of hours of studying this thing, I'm still learning. I just know that there's more I don't know now. Why, why should the average person who's might be listening to this just see, here's about cryptos to get rich? That seems daunting. And like, I don't got thousands of hours. I've got kids, family, elderly parents to take care of. What would be your elevator pitch to them to say, I think you'd probably start looking into this thing?
Yeah, I mean that's a huge problem, is people just like apathy. They've got busy lives. They don't want to spend the time, or they think they need a hell of a lot of time. Um, but really you can start small, really. Just get some skin in the game, right? Like you got €10, €20, just like download a wallet on your phone, like write down 12 words. It takes like 2 minutes, you'll have a wallet. Get a friend to send you €10. You've now got it, you've experienced it, you've received the transaction, you can see it, and now you can start to study a little bit, read an article here or there, follow some accounts on Twitter, go to your local meetups, like meet people. You don't have to spend thousands of hours. The thousands of hours will like look after themselves over time,
You
right?
get
It's like
sucked
that
in,
saying,
yeah.
like, look after the pennies and the pounds will look after themselves. It's the same thing. It's just like do a little bit here and there. Like just make sure that your radar is working, and you're picking up little bits here and there. And over time you'll just start to build a knowledge, and as you build that knowledge, your mind will be opened to the huge potential of Bitcoin to help not just you but humanity in general and your future generations. So if you're worried about you know kids, and trying to put food on the table and trying to give them an education, and you know all of that kind of stuff that parents generally do, um, Bitcoin helps with that, right? Like, I mean, look at, if you had dollar cost averaged into Bitcoin over the last, like, 5 years or 10 years, like you'd be like insanely wealthy. So a lot of people will look at the price now and they'll say, oh, it was 70,000 US dollars. It's now like, 20 or 23 or whatever it is. Um, and that's enough to turn them off. Whereas you kind of just have to forget about the price of it and just understand the purchasing power of it. And I think I watched one of your podcasts where I think you said something along the lines of, people shouldn't have to put their savings at risk just to be able to afford to put food on the table next year, next month, whatever it might be. And that's really what it's all about. It's people are just living paycheck to paycheck. They're struggling. They're worried about different things. Bitcoin's probably the last thing on their mind. But, little baby steps, start off small. Like I said, get skin in the game, download a wallet, get a friend to send you some money. And just ask them, like, hey, what podcasts are good to listen to? Like, who's good to follow on Twitter? Like, what should I read? And there's a ton of stuff out there. And you can spend an hour a week, 10 hours a week, like whatever you can spare. But yeah, baby steps. Just start up small, and you'll get sucked in.
I just pulled up a thing on my phone that, like, as you say, Twitter is a great little resource for learning. But I don't know if you can see it, but it's just like Bitcoin with a filing cabinet, and it's
Yeah,
like Bitcoin is tech, economics, energy. You need to learn about philosophy. You need to learn. You need to learn about history. You need to learn about money. You need to learn some math. You need to learn about
yeah,
freedom, about politics, about computer science. There's a lot in that. But at the
yeah,
same
yeah,
time, like I'm trying to really understand this thing. But if I flip it and go, Dini, do you understand the internet in all those dynamics? And the answer to that is no, I don't. I just know that I open my laptop
yeah,
and I hit Google and I'm on the internet, and that does me.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
and I used to use the analogy when I was explaining Bitcoin that I'm into cars and motorbikes and I understand how engines work, and I understand, what's going on to make the car move, and I get the benefits of driving my car. But my wife has a car as well, and she doesn't have a clue how the engine works or anything. She just knows you put the key in and away she goes. We both get the same
yeah,
benefit out of it. So it's just, I suppose,
yeah,
sometimes as humans we probably try and overthink stuff and make stuff more difficult for ourselves. Again, the conversation I had with Greg Foss, like, because it's just talking about risk, and it's just like a percentage. It's a risk managed approach. You don't have to be 100%, but as Greg says, by being zero Bitcoin is more risky. Just using math to work it out has been more
yeah,
risky than having a risk adjusted or a position in Bitcoin. And that comes down to the fact of, well, I don't even care if you know what it is or how it works. None of that shit matters. If we do the math on this thing, it's just like you should own some, or you're taking on more risk with all the wealth you own and everything you own by owning zero Bitcoin.
yeah, absolutely. And I love Greg Foss. Like he's amazing. He just really he just really boils it down to numbers and risk and percentages. And he's dead right. Like, I mean, if you have a portfolio and you're aiming for like, you know, I don't know what, like 10% every year, like compounded returns, like whatever it is, like if you take 1% of that and you put it into Bitcoin, like what's the worst you can lose? 1%. But what's the upside? The upside is like way higher. Like you could make your whole 10% like just on Bitcoin a lot. Like it's just it doesn't make sense to be on zero. And that's just like, that's just simple math. That's just simple percentages. And in terms of the point you were making before about what was it you were talking about before talking about Greg Foss, you mentioned something else there about, oh yeah, about the protocols. Um, yeah, I mean, nobody understands TCP/IP. Like you said, nobody understands how the internet works. Nobody understands how emails are sent, right? Nobody's running an SMTP server. Nobody understands how all that stuff works, but you just do it. So when I hear these like critics talk about like, oh, it's too complicated and like, I don't understand it, or like common person won't understand it. Like, you know, I, like I've heard people like Mark Cuban and stuff like that say that in the past, and other people who like, we're supposed to look at these people and think you guys are smart investors, right? Like you're successful, you made it. And then you come out and hear them say stuff like, oh, it's too complicated. The tech is too complicated. It's like, that has to be the dumbest thing like you could ever say. Like it's too complicated. We know how tech evolves and we know how it gets user friendly. So yeah, it's you don't need to learn any of that stuff. Like if you do learn it, your mind will be blown because you'll realize that like the code, the software that is Bitcoin is just one of the most amazing pieces of software ever written. um and that, like, if you understand any part of it at all, like it'll blow your mind. Difficulty adjustment, like everything, all the different like gems that are in there to make up Bitcoin. It will like truly blow your mind, but you don't need to understand any of that. You just, like I said, you just need to download a wallet, go into the app store, download it, write down 12 words, get sent some Bitcoin. Easy. You've done it. You understand Bitcoin. Then that's it.
So where we are then right now, like, I suppose my question was, is it too late to get into Bitcoin? So you're in Bitcoin a decade, and I think a lot of people, this is how a lot of people end up in. And I done a survey on my Instagram, and I think it was 40% of the people who follow me own zero Bitcoin, which I was really surprised at.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm like, if you gotta own other stuff, but like own the thing that's most likely to be here in a decade as well. Own both. Don't pick one or the other. But I think people are, and the reason for that is, I'll explain my thesis on it. My assumptions is that people are gambling. They're like, Bitcoin's too far gone. I need to buy something, because they don't understand value and price and the difference. They're just looking at price, and price is not the indicator to look at. But because Bitcoin is priced much higher than some other altcoins, they're like, okay, I'm going to get these altcoins, and when they go up, I'm going to pivot into Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And for me, I think the upside, like Bitcoin has so much more upside. For me, I like to dollar cost average into it. I call it a pension strategy, just like a traditional pension.
Mm-hmm.
Every month, some of my strategy is to accumulate more Bitcoin. I'm not interested in the price today because I'm thinking of it in a pension terms, like in decades. So
Yeah.
it's irrelevant whether it's 16 grand or 35 grand, because in decades, Bitcoin, it has to be orders of magnitude. You have to add zeros onto the price today, or it's gone to zero. They're the only two situations
Yeah.
that I see can play out. So
Yeah.
it's like a rounding error, whatever the figure is. I don't need to worry about it. I don't need to trade. I don't need to give it any interest because I don't need to. I just need to
Yeah.
accumulate the thing. And my other point is, in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, it doesn't matter. Bitcoin is the most likely thing to be here. Okay. So I need to own that. But any other altcoin may go to zero in that time and it won't affect Bitcoin. But the opposite isn't true. That if I own something other than Bitcoin, because thousands of them have already gone to zero, that can go away and it doesn't affect Bitcoin. It keeps trucking on. So again, just in trying to manage risk, I should own Bitcoin, especially if I'm in crypto. I
Yeah.
should have a Bitcoin position. And if I understand how to manage risk, that should be the majority of my portfolio in
Yeah.
how I understand managing risk anyway. What,
Absolutely.
what would you think of that? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, you're dead right. It's like a lot of people have that unit bias where they see the price of Bitcoin, they think, oh, it's way too high. I can get this other one for like a lot cheaper, and if it moons, like I'm gonna make like so much money. Um, and there's so many things wrong with that thinking. But again, it goes back to kind of what we were talking about at the start of the conversation. It's natural human behavior. Like we've never really had anything that's like truly scarce, like that's truly certainly not money. We haven't had capped money, like even on the gold standard, like it was still like very quickly into a proper gold standard, like it was just like paper gold. So we find it hard to understand this concept of fixed supply and scarcity. And so what most people are doing is they're trying to, as I said, get more euros. So they want to put euros in, they want their coin to moon, and they want to take euros back out. Or even if they think like, oh, it'll moon and then I'll like convert it into Bitcoin after that. Um, it's just the wrong way of looking at things. And once you understand the concept of like fixed money supply and the benefits that it has on society as a whole, but not even that, you just need to understand that when you're buying Bitcoin, you're buying an amount of Bitcoin, an amount of Satoshis out of the overall 21 million that's only ever going to exist. And so your only goal should be to buy as much of that as you can while it's cheap. And if you're like waiting or you think it's too expensive, like you're just going to miss the boat. You can't time the market. There's a reason why 99% of traders like lose money. It's just impossible. We're not good at it as humans. Um, so yeah, it's just looking at it from the wrong perspective, not understanding that if the world is moving on to a Bitcoin standard and there is only a 21 million supply, you need to get as many of those Satoshis as possible. Your piece of that supply needs to keep growing. It doesn't matter about the dollar denominated or euro denominated like value of your stack. It just needs to keep growing comparative to the 21 million that exists. And once you can wrap your head around that concept, you'll understand it and you'll get it and you'll be like, okay, well now I need to get more. I need to start earning it. I need to start like using it as savings. I need to put a little bit by every week. And so it's just a mindset thing. It's just a mindset thing that people are not used to. Humans are not used to, and it just needs to change.
Yeah. And I suppose I'll just use this little piece to remind people that I'm not a financial advisor. Are you a financial advisor, John?
Yes, buy Bitcoin.
Yeah, but don't take that as financial advice. Do your own due diligence. We're not telling you what to do with your money. Personally, and I think I speak for you, John, getting into Bitcoin and
Yeah,
understanding
yeah,
Bitcoin has been
yeah.
probably one of the best financial decisions of my life.
Hmm.
But listeners, go and do your own research and understand how to manage your own money. yourself. And if you're enjoying the content, do us a favor, hit the like button, throw a comment in, say hello. It just supports the algorithm and helps. So how as you were chatting there, I was thinking about it like this. Every day, every week, every month, more and more people are understanding this thing. But there's big entities, and because we're fiat thinkers, and most of these people are new to Bitcoin, so they don't know that they should be denominating in sats and thinking in Bitcoin. They're valuing it in whatever their local currency is, whether it's dollars or pounds. So they're just thinking, how can I get more pounds? How can I get more dollars out of this Bitcoin? So they're all sitting on the sidelines. So starting to figure out, okay, there's something to this. I need to own it, but I need to get at the very bottom. And what I see happening now is every single day, like there's a queue of people all waiting to dive in. And even in my group, my Retire Early Club, you know, a lot of the guys are waiting to ape in. And although I don't trade and I don't condone trading, you know, a lot of the guys have capital and they want to ape in. But like every day there's like more, imagine it's like a train station. Every day more people arrive and they're all waiting to get on that train. And then there's more, and then there's more, and then there's more. And it's just like, there's not going to be enough room on the train. It's going to be like a mass capitulation. And I don't know when that happens or if it happens like that because when we're looking at like the adoption of the internet, say it took 30 years and Bitcoin apparently is growing at twice as fast. Okay. And we're 15 years in, you know, not quite, almost. Okay. But like, we're still at such a tiny percentage of global ownership. If we're growing twice the rate, like this thing is going to have to, there's going to have to be a mass capitulation that literally might happen in a month. You know, am I wrong in that thesis, or possibly it doesn't play out like that? But like, because we're running out of time for this thing to be worldwide adopted, it should happen quicker than the internet because we're leveraging it on the rails of the internet. You know, we have the internet to disperse the information, the education. Okay, so we're building on top of that tech. So it's exponential growth, tech on tech on tech. So I sort of see it as there's a case that this thing just blows up in a month of mass capitulation and goes from this price to, you know, add a zero, add two fucking zeros if you like. Who knows? Like, and that's just one little silly thesis that I play around in my head sometimes.
I think it's, I mean, I've seen that, like, you know, that comes up on Twitter all the time. You know, somebody just kind of like posts a tweet and says, you know, there's going to be a green candle that melts your face off one day and you're going to, like, you know, and, you know, as corny and as it sounds, like, it's just, it could actually happen that way, right? Like, you can wake up one morning and find out that some like huge player with like an absolute massive amount of cash on the sideline has just done like the biggest OTC trade you've ever heard of. And you wake up one morning and Bitcoin's gone from 23 grand to, like, you know, 87 grand or something. And then you look at it the next morning, it's gone up to like 450 grand or something because everyone else is on like, oh shit, Apple just bought Bitcoin. Like, now we're piling in, right?
Yeah.
It could happen that quickly.
Well,
Or it's a very slow thing. Like, who knows? It could just be as more countries fall, currencies fall, like more people start to realize getting it into Bitcoin. It could play out much slower. And
do you
people have
have,
said that to me before. Like, friends have asked me that, like, well, like, you know, what if you're dead in like 40 or 50 years, like, and Bitcoin like hasn't happened in your lifetime? And like, you know, there's many answers to that, but like one or two quick answers is like, it doesn't have to happen in my lifetime. I just know that my purchasing power keeps increasing every year. Life for me gets cheaper and cheaper and cheaper every year, and for everybody else on a fiat standard, it gets more expensive, because wages just simply aren't keeping up with inflation. Um, that's one answer, and the second answer is I can just sleep well at night knowing I'm doing something to try and save humanity. You know, like, you know, that really just is an amazing thing. Like, imagine doing something that, like, you know, everybody talks about the cliche of like, you know, do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life. You know, imagine doing that, like, with something, you know, that you just absolutely like, just you know that it's going to be the rest of your life and you get to do it every day. You know, if you're working on a startup or you're working in a Bitcoin company or you have time to dedicate it to it all the time, um, that's just an amazing feeling, and you feel like you're actually accomplishing something. And not only that, just the other point that I don't think we've touched on yet on this call as well is that Bitcoin just makes you a better person, right? Like, you, once you get Bitcoin and you switch from that like high time preference lifestyle to a low time preference lifestyle, you start to realize, you know, well, hang on a second, there's a bright, like, hopeful future. Like, it's not all crazy and bad. Like, a lot of people seem to think, like, Bitcoiners, especially, like, you know, when I talk to my friends, I tell them about the clown world and the collapse of society and like how all these evil people are running the world, and they always think like, "Oh my god, it's so depressing. Like, why would I want to think like you do?" And I'm like, I'm not depressed, like because I've got my insurance, I've got Bitcoin, like I know what's coming. I see this beautiful, bright future. Like it might be like hell for the next 10 years, but like I'm going to be able to get out the other side of it. Um, and having that low time preference and seeing that like future, you actually start to just, start to look after yourself a little bit better. You start to think about like, friendships or family relationships. You start to think about health, education, because you're actually thinking about the decades ahead, right? Whereas most people are just thinking about like next week, next month. How do I pay the damn bills? Like, how do I put food on the table? Like, I'm not thinking about like, 20 years from now. Um, but that's really what Bitcoin does to you is it switches you to that low time preference mode of thinking. And that has just massive benefits for yourself, like as a person as a whole. It's just one of the added benefits of Bitcoin. It fixes not just the world but the individual as well.
It's interesting you say that because I've noticed with myself in the last few years that I appreciate history more than I ever have. In that, like, for
Yeah.
years, history was just history and that was old. But I could never conceptually understand the generations and the lives that passed and that were lived. And I
Mm.
sort of I compare Bitcoin to land a lot because like land is the bedrock. Let's just say my local street here. I was walking by a house and it was old, and a family had been raised in that house, and there was probably five other houses there before this one, but it had fallen into disrepair. And I think the old lady who was actually living in it, she passed away, and then the house a sale went up, and next minute it's all done up, and now there's another, young family there in
Mm.
their early 30s, and just the whole cycle will repeat. But underneath that house, where the house is built, the bedrock, the land is unchanging. It's just there, and we build on it, and we come, us as humans, and we last whatever 75 years if we're lucky, and then we expire and new humans come. But the land is just unchanging, and that's what you need. And that's sort of how I see Bitcoin as. It's just this unchanging protocol. Somehow Satoshi, by pooling all these little magic things into the protocol, has created this thing that is just incentivizes humans to maintain the thing, or pays humans to maintain the thing and act in our own personal self-interest to create this thing,
Mm-hmm.
this protocol that just cannot change and can remain the same. And yeah, no, it's just that when you said like I think Bitcoin changed how you think, I'm like, well, maybe that's why I'm like, I'm much more aware of the finiteness of my life. I find, and I
Mm.
was thinking maybe it's that just I'm in my 40s. When you're in your 30s, you're like, you're young, invincible. But now I'm starting to, go to funerals to people who aren't quite too much older than me, and I'm hearing about
Yeah.
school friends passing away and stuff, and I'm like, Jesus, like life's finite, Dinny, and you could be closer to the end than the beginning.
Yeah.
Let's try and see how your values align, see how you're doing. And I'm a bit like yourself. My values are so aligned in that I don't know how I stumbled on Bitcoin and got into working on it, but it's just amazing. I get to do something that I'm passionate about, sort of like my career before Bitcoin was in fitness. I'm passionate about fitness,
Yeah.
and it's great crack. And I devoted a large part of my adult life working on fitness, and now I'm getting to do it on Bitcoin, and it's just like I don't even know where Bitcoin with Dinny goes or how the company scales. I'm not really working that hard on it, but I've like no worries. I'm like, I've already done enough.
Yeah.
There's already enough people
Yeah.
in the world know my name. And when they need to learn about Bitcoin, I'm going to be the person they trust and ring. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
if this thing plays out, I've already done enough work. Like I'm not going to struggle.
Yeah.
And the fact that I dollar cost average and
Nice.
accumulate Satoshis, it just gives me peace of mind that that's money that no one can take from me. And it's a money that one by one, every human on the planet's
Absolutely.
going to realize they probably want to own some of these things.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's great. I love it. It's Bitcoin is like, touching back on the kind of history part where you're kind of walking along and you see these houses and you realize they've been sitting there for a long time. And a lot of people kind of, that passes them by. They're not able to grasp it. You know, it's similar. I was talking to a friend the other day about something similar as well, where I think as humans, we just naturally don't have an ability to think about history in that way. We can only see, in our lifetimes, even, like, if you're somebody who's like 40 years of age, all you've ever known is fiat currency. All you know is this currency that like inflates every year, and it's not connected to the gold standard. And the government tells you to do everything, and your pensions are like the done thing, and they're normal, and you don't question anything. but but you kind of have to look back and think, like, how old is the human race? A lot of this stuff is really just experimental stuff that's only been around a few decades. Like, if you think about the money we're on, it's like 53, 52 years old. Like, that's a blip. It's a fraction of a nanosecond in like human history. People don't understand that like the money is currently broken. It's a 52-year experiment that isn't working. It's broken, but they can't comprehend that because it's what they've known all their life. Um, so if you can like harness that ability to look back through history and see how things have changed, learn from history, study the fall of the Roman Empire, study other civilizations, like study how debasement of money has destroyed civilizations in the past, study how European traders like created glass beads and went down to Africa in the 15th century and just like ravaged that whole continent. It was one of the most prosperous places in the world until money printing destroyed it. um, you know think about, like, a lot of stuff that's happened in history and is repeating itself like right now. But as humans, we can't comprehend that because all we tend to see is like what's in our lifetime. In our past, if we have the ability to go back to our own past, we only ever go back as far as our lifetime. We very rarely go back past that. And the other part of it is like, yeah, it's like the spiritual aspect of it as well. You talk about Bitcoin being this steady protocol, like, block after block, every 10 minutes, like a block is produced. And it's like, it's just, it's stamping, history and value into this like time chain and ownership that like can't be changed. So it's something that you can rely on, like going into the future. That you have this like single source of truth that everybody is aligned on and everybody can work towards. And it's like an anchor in this like crazy clown world that we live in now, where nothing is food isn't real, healthcare isn't real, society isn't real, conversations aren't real, like everything is just fake. But you have this like single source of truth that you can like rely on, and it's almost spiritual in nature, right? Like, I don't know if you're spiritual or not. I was obviously, like, probably like me, or you were brought up like Catholic in Ireland. I disowned the church like in my late teens and early 20s because I just thought it's a filthy cesspool of pedophiles. I don't want anything to do with it. Um, but since becoming a Bitcoiner, I've learned to kind of separate spirituality and the church, right? Like God and the church, and see them as different things. I still hate the church, but like I can understand that having some kind of spirituality in your life like grounds you. And there's a lot of people that, and this is like, I learned this from other Bitcoiners. There's a lot of people that kind of see that correlation between, say, like the Bible and the time chain. It's like just this single source of truth that guides you through life, and you can rely on to keep you on the straight and narrow as everything else just kind of splinters around crazy around you. Um, so there's so many aspects to Bitcoin that like really, you can pull on so many threads. But it's just like, I've yet to find anything bad about Bitcoin. I've yet to find anybody that's like, damn it, I wish I never knew about Bitcoin, right? It's like, it's just, it improves your life in so many ways. It's phenomenal. It's not just like, internet nerd money. Like, it's just, it's so much more than that.
Yeah, the whole truth thing is big, like, because that's one of the things that would concern me a little bit about the way the world is trending. It's so hard now to find truth. And now with the rapid growth of artificial intelligence, like, you can make anyone say anything.
Mm,
But how do you know if they said
yeah.
it? You literally cannot prove it. And
Hmm.
therefore it's nice to have a source of truth. I think, as you said, it's something that we know is fact.
Yeah.
And although you can't trust anything, you can trust Bitcoin, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same kind of concept of, what's really going wrong with society today. And, people like Jeff Booth and stuff will talk about this a hell of a lot more eloquently than I can. Um, but when you have, you know, corruption in the base layer, you have it in everything else. And because like
Just,
money
just,
has been
just, just,
destroyed.
explain what you mean by that, John, just for someone who isn't quite familiar with Jeff's work.
Well, when you're manipulating the money, when you know you have central banks manipulating interest rates, and you know everybody's kind of waiting with bated breath to see what the Fed is going to say, and like you know tomorrow morning's meeting, and what the ECB is going to say next month, and everybody's kind of waiting, and they can't make decisions, and like, will the rate go up? Will the rate go down? What will happen? When you have that kind of manipulation in the money, you can't really rely on anything. Like you can't like anchor prices to anything properly. You can't price anything because the money is so manipulated. And so when when you're looking for stores of value, then it's very very hard to get like a store of value when your money should be the store of value. But when that's broken, you end up reaching out and grasping at everything else to be stores of value. And so that's why like real estate becomes a store of value. Like it not only a store of value but a speculative asset, and everything else like it as well, it starts to become a speculative asset. Because people are just like they're grasping for like anything that they can like generate wealth and store their wealth in. And that's because you have this corruption in the underlying base layer in the money. And if you can get rid of that, i.e. get onto a Bitcoin standard or some kind of like fixed money standard, you fix the corruption in the base there so that you don't have it permeate out into everything else in society. And when it permeates out into everything else in society, that's when you get all of these problems with like food and healthcare and everything else, right? Like we all know the food is absolutely rotten. I mean, you know, I'm like living back in my hometown right now after traveling around for a while, and I was just down in the supermarket the other day, and I spent like over an hour walking around trying to find anything that didn't have sugar or seed oils in it, and it was virtually impossible. Every single thing on the shelves in the supermarket was just pure garbage. And that's the problem you have in society, is because we were producing all this mass produced junk that's so cheap to produce, because everything else has just been made more expensive, right? They're trying to, make everything else just not worth like making. Um, and again, this all comes from the corruption in the base layer, in the money. So if you can fix that, you can start to actually fix everything else around it. And Bitcoin helps with that by having this like single source of truth every 10 minutes, block after block. We have this like reliant like database of information that we can use to price things. So, another way of looking at that is when people see the Bitcoin price and it's flying up and down all over the place, and everyone thinks, oh, it's crazy volatile. It's not really crazy volatile. It's just an anchor that's trying to price everything else in the world as people come in and out all the time. Um, the price is just like a kind of irrelevant aspect of it right now. What you're seeing is, because it's a fixed supply, everything else that's happening around it and on top of it causes the price, quote unquote, value to like fluctuate so much. But it's really anchored, it's really steady. And you kind of just have to look at it in different ways, and just kind of really wrap your head around the fact that, as we progress through the next 14 years of Bitcoin and the 14 years after that, and whatnot, as the decades go out, you're going to see Bitcoin, hopefully what we all think is it's just going to start sucking up value from the rest of the world, right? It'll start pulling trillions out of the gold market cap and out of like real estate, and then derivatives will completely collapse. Like Greg Foss probably talked about bonds on your podcast. Like he's a fan of saying that bonds are garbage. Um, so all of this stuff is really going to get like pulled out of these secondary like markets, where a lot of this capital has like flown to in the past, because it's just been people in search of these like stores of value or like speculative assets, um because they just can't keep money in a bank account anymore. So what you'll see is a lot of that start to flow back into Bitcoin, and that's how Bitcoin will just, again, I don't like talking about the price, but that's how the price rises, because it's capped at 21 million.
Yeah, it's simple maths. Like there's two, I think there's like 2 million Bitcoin on exchanges, but like there's 50 million millionaires. So if just a small percentage of them
Yeah,
decide I might want to buy Bitcoin, fact this, that's it.
yeah.
It's like, let's bid this thing up to whatever price we want until a hodler decides to take some out of his wallet and sell it. But like, that's,
Hmm.
I don't think we appreciate how quick this thing turns around, and and literally everyone with their jaws on the floor going, how do we not see that coming? Like, how come we got steamrolled by this thing? Like, what just happened there? As fiat world is
Yeah.
just annihilated, like a nuclear
Yeah.
bomb going off in fiat world. But
Yeah.
with everything in fiat, and I suppose my openness to Bitcoin was I was involved in fiat health and fiat fitness, and as a
Yeah.
rational thinking person, which I think I am, I'm crazy, but I can think rationally. None of the shit made sense. Even when I was in personal trainer school and they were teaching us about the food pyramid, and I've mentioned this before on my
Yeah.
podcast, but I was just like, hold on a minute. Like, you're my instructor. You're in good shape. We're all young lads here. We train. There's not one of us eats 9 fucking processed carbs a day. Like, that's how you get fat. Why are
Yeah.
you teaching us this? Like, and you want us to go and teach that to our clients who are coming to us to lose weight? I was
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they're like, well, if you don't answer the test right, these are, and you're just scratching your head going, so it's bullshit.
Yeah.
We know it's bullshit. We can prove it's bullshit because of the way we live and train. But
Yeah.
in order for us to get this poxy certification, we have to go
You have
on,
to tick the right boxes. Yeah.
we have to go and go along with this circus of bullshit. And
Yeah.
I'm just like, all right, so that's basically how the whole world is working. We're all just chasing the fiat. So because there's a competition for us to get fiat for ourselves, we all operate it's like I can complain against the game and just get wrecked, or I can just play the game and try and get as much as I can. That was before Bitcoin. Now we can play the game, but we can also have this little side hustle where we go, this is my fuck you. This is my fuck you money, because
Yeah.
I'm going to
Yeah.
start accumulating this thing that's totally detached from that fiat world where nothing makes sense.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
practical terms, not nothing being a bit over dramatic, but where there's a lot of
Yeah.
just bullshit in the system that everyone goes along with, no one questions. And
Yeah.
I can play that game, but I can also, guess what? I'm playing 2 games here. I'm not all in
Yeah.
on one
Yeah.
game.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's it. Like nobody questions any of this stuff. It's yeah, I mean the food pyramid is obviously like upside down, right? But nobody questions it. Like like except for like Bitcoiners, right? Or any nutritionists that are worth their salt. But yeah, there's a lot of craziness like that in the world that just seems to happen. Um, and nobody says anything, right? You see like schools like inviting like drag queens in to do strip shows in front of 6-year-old kids, and everybody just goes like, "Yay, entertainment!" It's like, wait, like, are we not questioning this stuff? Like, what? Like, how are we falling apart as society where like we're all just afraid to question anything anymore in case we get like labeled or ostracized or canceled or whatever it might be?
It's the
But yet we
cancel.
all have this.
It's the
Yeah,
cancel. It's the
it's
cancel
the cancel
culture.
culture.
It's the witch burning, and I've been victim of that for a long while because I
Yeah,
like to have open discussion. And in some instances, I'll just poke
yeah,
fun because I know it'll piss people off. But in other instances, I genuinely want to talk about stuff. And especially during the
yeah,
last 2 years with COVID, like, I got a lot of
yeah,
stick for just questioning narratives and just saying, why can't we have a discussion about this? And like
yeah,
literally torn apart by people. And then lo and behold,
yeah,
within time, it's like people do 180s and people who were screaming one thing at me are now screaming the other thing at me because they've more information. But
yeah, yeah,
it's just mad, and I think it boils down to the whole thing of it's just so hard for us to find truth. And I'm as much trying to find it. It's not that I know truth. I'm trying to find truth by asking questions, and other
yeah.
people just think they know truth because maybe they can't critically think anymore, or maybe it's groupthink that you just get sucked into the herd mentality, and you never want to be doing the
Yeah,
opposite of the herd.
I
And
think that's what it is. I think that's what it is. A lot of the time is this like this group think, this herd mentality. It's and people. I don't think people are doing it for like nefarious reasons. I think they're just it's easier just to go along with the flow. It's easier to think the current thing than to like think for yourself, right? Like I mean, you see every put like Ukraine flags in their profiles, and you're like, oh, I'll do that too, like and it's like, well, do you really know what's going on over there? Like, are you just doing it because everyone else is doing it, right? Same thing, like you said, with the last 2 years and everything and what's going on. Like, people just never really questioned anything. Um, and I think a lot of it as well has to do with like, when you question things, you sometimes find, you know, truths that are hard to deal with.
yeah,
And
100%.
you have to face those truths and you have to become a stronger person in order to deal with them, in order to process them. think about them, form an opinion, realize how they're going to affect you, and make changes or decisions in your life to avoid or to perpetuate what it is that that decision, the consequences is. And people just don't want to do that. They literally just don't want to think. It's literally boils down to like just an apathy, a laziness. My life is comfortable.
Comfort
If
is
I
the word,
think
man.
that, like, yeah, if I think
Comfort.
that,
When you're
the
comfortable, you're
central banks are
fucked.
manipulating, yeah, exactly, yeah. When you're comfortable, you just go stagnant. Like you just, you don't, you know, you basically just have to keep on your toes, and you have to keep questioning everything. And a lot of us don't. And I mean, look, I didn't either. I'm I'm fairly bit on in my life now as well, and it took me quite a long time to realize that I was just, I was an NPC. I basically wasn't participating in anything. I was just basically being programmed to like say and do certain things, and you know, oh, you got to get on the property ladder, and oh, you got to start a pension, and oh, you got to go to college, and you got to do this, and nobody questions anything. They don't question like, well, why should I go to college? I have this skill and this passion. I want to do this thing over here. Why are you putting me through 4 years of college? Why can't I just go and do it? Like I know people who've left who never went to college and started careers, and they're like fabulously successful without ever going to college. Now, some things obviously you should go to college for. If you want to be a doctor or something like that, or a surgeon, like you should probably go to college. But for most things, like we're telling people they should go to college, and then we're sending them out 4 years later with like massive debt and like some social studies degree or something that's like useless, right? Like it's just, go and figure stuff out in the real world, like, and I think that's the problem is, yeah, most people just kind of, they just don't want to think. It's comfort. It's comfort. It's just like, leave me alone. Let me do my 9 to 5. Let me come home and put my feet up and crack a beer and watch the football. Like, I don't want to think about this or that or the other. My life's too stressful. I got kids. I got like, a boss that's nagging me, like, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, and
And
you could even see there, John, that it's not an individual's fault really. It's like we're
the
grown into
system
this
is just,
system
yeah,
to
it's the weight of
absolutely
the system.
steal it,
Yeah.
take all the spirituality out you, make that be like something that you shouldn't
Yeah.
even mention, okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then don't think, be conditioned the whole
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
feed you with shit so that you think
Yeah.
like crap, you feel like crap,
Yeah.
you've no energy to do anything about it.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
our system, the fiat system, relies, like it relies on slaves to go and take on debt. That's what the system relies on. It relies on slaves to take
Yeah.
on debt, and it doesn't work unless slaves are going to take on debt. And
Yeah.
again, I know I keep going back to Greg, but the podcast fresh in my mind. He's like, the reason you don't understand. I says, why don't they teach us about money in school? And he's like, the reason they can't teach about money in school, because if they taught you how money worked in school, you would not do what's required for the fiat system to function. You'd go, what the
Yeah.
hell? I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
This seems dumb.
Yeah.
And that's the simple
Yeah.
reason of why we're conditioned, and then we
Mm.
expire and we die. And then it was like, Jesus, did I ever get to look up at the stars? Did I ever get to like just do nothing? Did I ever get to screw around? What it was always to get more, to get more, to get more. But what do you do with it? You can't take more with you. By the time you're old
Yeah.
and retired, you can't do feck all, because the best of your body's behind you. I was away in Spain
Yeah.
in my camper van there last year for a couple of months. That was amazing because I met families who lived in vans,
Nice.
and conventional wisdom would say like, oh, these people, what are they doing? That's so dumb. But at night,
Yeah.
I'd just see a family out playing the guitar. I'd see the kids washing up the dishes. I never seen a single tablet. Okay, I seen the family together and just having experiences
Mm-hmm.
of like living with their
Yeah.
kids. And yeah, like the dad might have been doing a bit of work on the computer, but he was there sitting on a beach in Spain with his kids around him. And I was just like, this is the way to go. Like these people are winning, and this traditional
Yeah.
framework of society are losing. Like these people have so much more wealth. Wealth isn't financial. Wealth is the overall experience where you take in finance, your time, your experience, your relationships, everything. Like these people are so wealthy, but traditionally they'd be
Yeah.
thought of as like bums or wasters,
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's just like, we got
Exactly.
this so wrong. Like,
Oh yeah, completely. And it's it's hard because like if you do that these days, like you're going against the grain, and people will look
Totally,
at you
yeah.
strange. Like what are you doing? Like I mean, you know, I you know I lived in Canada for like 12 years. I left Ireland like 14 years ago. I lived in Canada for 12 years, and you know, a year and a half ago, I decided to like leave and head down to Austin. Um, and I basically just kind of like sold everything. I sold every like piece of like equipment, furniture, like sold my truck, sold everything. I just kept like, paddleboard and sports equipment and skis and bikes and stuff like that. Um, but I basically sold everything. I packed one bag and I went down, and it was just so like unbelievably freeing to do that. I'd always thought about it for so long, and I thought that's what I was going to do. Like when I left Ireland initially, it was like just be a digital nomad and travel. And I kind of got sucked into staying in one place, as amazing as Whistler was. But um, it's just such a freeing thing to do, to know that you're not controlled by your possessions, and it's very very hard to do that. But if you can do it, that's real wealth. That's real wealth, especially if you have family and kids and everything like that, right? Spending time with your kids is the ultimate goal. Like that's literally what, like, you should be doing. And so if you have both parents out working, and the kids are in like, you know, some child mind in their house or something, and the parents come home at 7 in the evening and they get like 10 minutes with the kids before they're sent up to bed. Like, I mean, you know, that only exists because of the society we live in, where like everybody's forced to like work multiple jobs, and just to pay bills. Um, and it's just like, the funny thing is, it's like just a little bit of saving in Bitcoin, just a little bit of trying to like change that around and look out for yourself and realize that, okay, like maybe there's a better way. Maybe these Bitcoiners like are onto something. I'll put like a little bit of my savings in every week. Before you know it, you've got some like extra purchasing power, right? Maybe you got enough saved up for that holiday, so that like, you don't have to take out that credit union loan to go on your holiday anymore. You can just pay for it, right? Um, Little things like that start to like add up a lot, once you get into that mindset. And like you said, once you kind of fall down that Bitcoin rabbit hole, as we know, like it changes you completely, and you change a lot of aspects of your life. But yeah, going back to the comfort word, that's what it's all about. It's just trying to get out of that comfort zone, and it's very very hard for people to do that.
Yeah, the comfort zone is like the death of happiness.
Yeah.
Although we think
Yeah.
it's not, but it is. When you challenge yourself, when you're doing anything,
Yeah.
it's when you grow. It's the catalyst, I
it's
think.
it's
Is
such a weird word, isn't it? It's like comfort, and that phrase like comfort zone, it's like it kind of has all these beautiful like
yeah, it sounds
connotations of
good,
like,
but
yeah,
like it's
everything's good, like fluffy clouds, I'm in my comfort zone. But you're really just like withering away and dying, like you're not doing anything.
yeah,
And it's kind of like, yeah, it's crazy.
yeah. One of my coaches used to always say, "Dinny, we're growing or we're dying." Business mentors,
Yeah.
Alex Hermosi, he'd be like, "It's always grow." I was like, I might just like keep the company. We're not going to expand. We're going to stand still. We try and hit the
Yeah.
same. And it's like, you don't get it. Like, you're growing or you're dying. There's no such thing
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
standing still.
Yeah.
And one thing you mentioned about possessions, I agree 100% with that. Trip in the camper van. I'm fortunate enough that I have a lot of toys. I have a lot of material junk. Okay. When I was away in my camper van, I had nothing. I just had the van and I had one surfboard, and that was all I needed. And it was just awesome.
Yeah.
But it wasn't even that I was entertained. It was that the fact I didn't have any possessions, I just felt lighter. It was like there was just I didn't have to keep things tidy and maintain them, and there was just I could just go and sit outside and just like look up at a tree and a bird sitting on it, and I could do that for an hour because I had nothing else to do. And it was just
Yeah.
like it was a different experience, and I was just like, and a friend of mine who's a little bit older and wiser, he was like, Dinny, I was like, oh, I'm going to do this holiday next year. I'm definitely going to. He's like, Dinny, you have to change your mindset. This isn't a holiday. This should just be a way of life. Yeah, and I was
Mm.
like, you know what, you're dead, because this guy's been doing this for 15 years, and every year I see him go
Yeah.
away, and I'm like, oh, I'll do it, but I'd be tied up with a business and I could never go. And this year, my wife was just like, go, and
Yeah.
and now I'm just like, oh yeah, I've seen the light, and go
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
John, I want to
Yeah.
talk to you a little bit about Zaprite, please, because you're building a Bitcoin company. Tell us a little bit about what's going on and what you're up to.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mentioned there briefly before that I lived in Canada, And so I've been a freelancer, contractor pretty much all my life, doing graphic design, web design, then UI, UX and stuff, web development. And so about 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I started working for Bitcoin companies in Canada, Bull Bitcoin, a couple of other companies, you might have heard them, um, doing UI, UX. And they were paying me in Bitcoin. And I needed, to send a professional invoice. They're a proper, like, legit company. They needed a professional invoice, and so I needed something that I could actually, like, send, and that would calculate live rates and show QR codes and pull addresses and stuff like that. And there was nothing really out there. There was BTC Pay Server, which I tried to set up. I had one of the original Casa nodes from, like, 4 or 5 years ago. I was trying to work that, and, like, even for somebody who was like techie like me, it was still hard. Um, and so I always had this idea of, like, I'll build an invoicing platform. And so, a couple of years ago, I decided, all right, like, now's the time. I'm going to do it. I started building just hobby project, evening, weekends. I never learned how to build like a modern kind of like React web app. So I just kind of rolled up my sleeves, learned how to do it. Like, got some help from a couple of friends in those Bitcoin companies, some developers who kind of showed me the ropes and showed me the way. And I built it out, and it started to get a little bit of attention. People were using it. It worked perfectly for what its intended purpose. And so when I decided to kind of, like, up sticks and do this kind of digital nomad thing and leave Canada, 18 months ago, um, I kind of said, like, oh, where's the first place I'll go? And I went down to Austin because, Bitcoin Twitter was telling me, like, that's where everything's going on in Bitcoin land. And I went down there, and it just, that place, I can't even put into words. Like, it's just, it's absolutely phenomenal. Like, I can imagine it's what, like, Silicon Valley was like in the 90s. It's just, there's so much going on right there. Like, everything is happening there. Like, all the developers are pouring in there. All Bitcoiners are coming in, even if they're not working on Bitcoin, they're just Bitcoiners that have remote jobs. They'll come in and they'll work out of the co-working spaces. Um, there's a ton of meetups. Like, there's 3 or 4 meetups every month that regularly get over 100 people. Like, it's just, there's like hackathons, events, conferences, like, everything's going on. All the big names pass through town, and they have little fireside chats and stuff in the co-working spaces. And it's just a really amazing place. But when I got down there, like, all of that obviously sucked me in, and I wanted to stay, but I started to realize there was a lot more people interested in what I was building. And so I launched a US company. I took on some funding from some investors, and I actually, like, started a proper startup. And that's something that I never saw myself, doing up until, like, a couple of years ago, because, I was kind of stuck in my own, like, comfort zone, my own run. So anyway, that's kind of a long-winded way around of the kind of history of Zaprite and how it got started and to where we are now. But essentially, what it is it's expanding out to be this kind of all-encompassing suite of merchant tools, just to allow people to start, like, integrating Bitcoin into their payment flows as a freelancer contractor, or into their small businesses. Um, and it's a web app, and it's non-custodial, so we don't touch your money. We encourage you to, like, plug in your own wallet into it, and we just build UI UX wrappers around wallet connectors. So we'll give you, like, invoicing, POS, like, product links, all things like that, and then eventually build an accounting platform out on top of that as well, so people can actually understand how their businesses are running on a Bitcoin standard. So it's been a really exciting journey so far.
Yeah, that's awesome. So is that's going to keep you busy now for the foreseeable future, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. I've pretty much, like, stopped consulting now. I haven't done any consulting in, like, well over a year. I kind of just, emailed all my clients and said, look, this is what I'm doing now. I'm going to take a shot at this. So I've taken on, like, funding. So I got to, like, dedicate 100% of my time to it. It just wouldn't be fair otherwise, right? To take on money and kind of work part time. So I had to throw myself into it 100%. And yeah, it's been amazing. So just working with developers, just talking to advisors, investors, and just trying to get the product built out. Um, we've just gone through, like, 3, 4, probably 5 months of, like, just heavy development, of just upgrading the tech stack and getting it ready for just for the future. Because what I had built is basically, like, while it did the job, it wasn't really scalable. Um, and so that should be launching soon, hopefully this month or early next month. And then that'll allow us to just, like, hit the ground running with a lot of the roadmap features that we have, which should be really exciting to see the product developed out.
Deadly. Um, and would that be like, if let's say if a business wanted to accept Bitcoin, they'd be able to do it through your service?
Yeah, so right now it's more geared towards like freelancers, contractors, and that service type business, which
Okay.
might be sending out like invoices like every now and again, right? They might go into their invoicing software and do it. It wouldn't be suitable, say, for like coffee shop or a restaurant or a POS system, that type of like quick, small turnaround stuff. But we will be building that in, so we'll be eventually. But right now, the MVP is more geared towards service industries that are like, you know what, I want to put this Bitcoin address on the invoice, and I want to try accepting Bitcoin and see if anybody will pay me. So we've got like Stripe on there as well, so you can connect your Stripe account for credit card payments as well. So you can just show you get your hosted invoice page, and you can show like multiple options. Bitcoin, you can connect your own node and have Lightning payments in there as well. So you can just show your payer a few options, and hopefully over time they'll get incentivized to buy Bitcoin. And we'll build some features in there as well that will allow them to do that. So we'll offer like discounts on, you might offer 5% off if you pay by like on chain or Lightning, and maybe add a 3% surcharge on credit cards to cover the fee. And so your payer might see that and go like, oh, screw that, I'm going to get some Bitcoin and actually get this 5% discount. So, and we'll build in like, partnerships with different places where you can actually like, get that Bitcoin for people as well to try and make the whole process seamless.
That's deadly, man. If you've heard my other podcast, you probably hear one of my last questions, which is, in 2030, what do you think the price of a Bitcoin will be?
I have absolutely no idea. But my short answer would be orders of magnitude higher than what it is right now. Again, like guessing price is one of the things that I've kind of like stopped doing in the last few years. As you go down the rabbit hole, you realize it's the most it's the least important part of Bitcoin. Maybe not from an adoption standpoint, but I think you know where I'm going with that.
It gets good traction on the videos when I cut it and someone throws out, it's going to be 5 million, 10 million, 500 grand.
Yeah.
It's literally for the algorithm is all I'm looking for here.
I can give you a snippet if you want it for the video. But yeah, no, I mean, look, I always tell people, I kind of throw off the cuff remarks with people like that. I've got family members and friends that have bought Bitcoin in the past, and they bought it at 50, 60,000, and they're like, oh, it's down now, I've lost money. Like, do you think it's going to go back up? And I'm like, look, Bitcoin's going to be like 10 million plus in the future, without doubt. Like, don't worry about it. And they're like, oh, really? You think so? And I'm like, well, yeah, you just have to like, manage your expectancy, your time. Like, do you want it to be that tomorrow? Do you want it to be that like in a month, in a year, in 10 years? And really, again, it just goes back to I try and just get them to dollar cost average, just like a little bit, use it as a savings account. And that's really what it is. But yeah, who knows in 2030? I think the world's going to look very different in 2030. So we'll see. We'll all be living in our 15-minute cities, and, eating our boat bars and living in the pods. So Bitcoin could be 100 million per coin at that stage. Who knows?
Well, I tell you, I won't be there. I'll be living in my property.
Yeah, we've got our insurance policy, so we're good. We've got our escape hatch. We're all right. Yeah.
Brilliant. John, is there anywhere you'd like to direct anyone to, maybe the Zaprite Twitter or anything, to connect with you, to follow along what you're doing?
Actually, yeah, I wanted to mention one thing as well. If you want to connect with me, it's just Zaprite app on Twitter, or just zaprite.com. And I'm just John_Zaprite on Twitter. Follow me, reach out to me, DM the Zaprite account if you got any questions, want any help onboarding or anything. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is the Dublin Bitcoiners meetup.
Yeah.
We finally have a meetup in Dublin, in Ireland, that's Bitcoin only. I don't think there has been one so far. I knew I was poking at a few people when I knew I was coming back to Ireland a few months ago to try and see what was happening, and I just got like crickets on Twitter. So Gary posted something on Twitter, a month or so back, and I saw it and I just went, awesome! Somebody's setting up a meetup. This is amazing. So Zaprite has got involved with a bit of sponsorship and stuff like that, and then we were out there as well. Obviously, the first one at the end of January. They're going to be the last Saturday of every month. From what I know, out in Harmonstown Avenue, I think is the name they're on. And who knows, if they get much bigger, they may move into the city or elsewhere. But all of them, Dublin Bitcoiner, we're Dublin Bitcoiners. I can't remember which one
Yeah, I was
on
just looking
Twitter,
for it on Twitter
but
now. Yeah.
but yeah, he's starting to organize some really cool events. He just announced a treasure hunt in St. Dan's Park in Raheny for the end of April, which is going to be really cool. It'll be 12 seed words hidden around, and have a treasure hunt to find those, and he'll do little fun things to start onboarding people. And he's doing an amazing job at actually onboarding businesses onto Bitcoin as well. Every week I see a new business that he's got signed up. So follow Dublin Bitcoiner, and yeah, try and get to the meetup if you can. I think community is hugely important. Like face-to-face community meetups are massively important for Bitcoin. So get there and support if you can. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, good shout out there. John, I want to thank you for coming on, give us your time today. It was awesome to meet you, find out a bit about you, go a bit deeper into Bitcoin. It was a good conversation. And yeah, thanks a bunch, man. Hopefully we'll chat again in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully we'll catch up again in the future, and appreciate you having me on. It's been amazing. Cheers.
Thanks, man.